Repeat, rinse and repeat. All right. I call the September 11th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting to order at 6:01. May I have a roll call?
Chair Andrew Carr.
I'm here.
Nicole Hendricks. Ron Heberlein.
Here.
Matt Constantine.
Here.
Sam Skall.
Here.
Yana Semenova.
Here.
Jennifer Willard.
Here.
Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This is a time that citizens have an opportunity to address the Planning Commission regarding any item that is not already scheduled for a formal public hearing. This includes the opportunity to address any items scheduled for a work session. Therefore, if any member of the audience, either here in City Hall or via Zoom, would like to speak about any other matter of concern, including any work session item, please raise your hand or send a message to the recorder using the Zoom chat function so that we may hear from you now. If you have not already, please fill out a testimony card and give it to the clerk. Also, please state your name and address for the record, or state that your address is provided on the testimony card. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to testify at this time? I see no hands. I see no movement. All right. Agenda item 1 then, the July 10th, 2024 meeting minutes are being considered as were previously distributed. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Having no corrections, the meetings are approved as distributed. Then moving on to informational items, agenda item 2. Next on the agenda is the informational item for Town Center Street naming. This is a chance for the Planning Commission to learn more about a specific topic. No public comment will be taken on this agenda item. If the public has questions or comments on the topic, you are encouraged to reach out directly to city staff. At this time, I call for city staff to present information that they have prepared for this item. Will city staff please present?
Thank you, Chair Carr. So Dan Pauly, the city's planning manager, and with us tonight we have Zoe Mombert, assistant to the city manager, who's been working with the city's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee on the question of street naming in town center. This commission worked really hard on the town center plan in years past and wanted to bring this forward because of its nexus to that, though it's not anything that goes in the development code or comprehensive plan that the commission typically deals with. This is for your information. And so when you start seeing street names in town center, you kind of understand the process that it went through to have that list to choose from. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Mombart to take us through it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Pauly. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. As Mr. Pauly stated, I'm Zoe Mombert. I work in the City Manager's Office, and I am the staff liaison to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. You know a lot about the Town Center Plan, probably more than I do, but just to give you kind of a sense of what we shared with the City Council recently, we reminded them of the process that the Planning Commission went through and the community went through in order to create the Town Center Plan. And with that being the heart and hub of the city, there was also, through the process that the community went through, there was a visioning, as you all know, and what came forward was a bold community vision to create accessible, diverse, connected, and a thriving place for people to gather. And recently, DRB approved a 5-story building that would go at the Sherry's property, which means with that development, there was a sense that the city should really look at what streets look like in this area and take this opportunity to really focus and create a special naming convention for the town center area. If you're familiar with the existing street naming process, it's essentially names from individuals that were around in, years ago, the settlers here that people are aware of, that people remember, as well as natural resources. So with that, we're going to skip ahead here. You guys are familiar with the goals that were laid out in Town Center, so I'm going to skip through this. And with that, staff came to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee seeking additional input. And what they asked the committee to do was to really think of an overarching theme to focus in this area, since it was intended to be a more diverse, inclusive hub of our community. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee started meeting with the planning staff in September of 2023. This was quite a task, as they were not as familiar as you are with Town Center, and it was a very broad ask of, what do you think? What themes should be included, or are there specific names that should be included in this area? So over the following months, the committee discussed ideas of those potential themes. They first started out with natural resources that would be specific to Indigenous communities that were in the area, as well as potentially local leaders. And then as they talked about local leaders, it really was, what does that mean? So the committee started to consider potential leaders and members of the community. Through this, it was a challenging process because it was such a broad ask. So they thought about who in the community could we honor? What does that look like? And they reached out to, or the committee reached out to multiple local tribes. We heard back from the Siletz tribe and an individual named Peter Hatch of the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians actually replied to their request. And he came to a meeting and spoke to them and shared that there were concerns about honoring Indigenous people. There's an important, in order to honor an individual appropriately, the tribe would really have to understand the area specifically. So just putting a name on the list doesn't mean that they would be honored appropriately, which means that the intent behind adding them to the list might not actually be achieved. It might actually do more harm. And the committee took that input very seriously and went back and forth about what should we do here? And ultimately they landed on a theme of significant people from historically marginalized background who made inspirational impact. Subsequently, names were proposed from the committee. They all submitted names. Staff took that list of names. We sent it back to them. And those names, as well as a number of names from the Secretary of State website of individuals that were a part of the suffrage movement and Black individuals that were associated with Oregon, they were added to this list. I believe that you got a copy of this lengthy list. So that's what was their next charge, was how do we narrow this list? And in front of you, you have the draft policy. And they talked about criteria. So the criteria that should someone, so we're going to skip ahead here a minute. If someone were to propose, or a developer were to propose a name in the future, they would follow the criteria in section Roman numeral 2.2. And these, the A through F, those are the criteria that the committee really considered as they looked at the names. So they took this criteria and then they all went back and individually scoured this packet of information and and submitted back names, up to 15 names. About half the committee submitted names, and we pulled that list together internally. We sent it back out to them with their last packet. We also did additional research on everybody that was on that list. So there are about 30 plus individuals that were on this prioritized list. And then at their last meeting, which was last night, they walked through the list of individuals, they talked through what made sense to them, and they ultimately recommended the list that is in subsection Roman numeral 3 in the town center street naming policy with today's date on it that should be in front of you this evening. They took a lot of care in this list. One thing that we went back and forth on many, many times is, should we have people that are living on this list? And ultimately it was decided that no, we should only have individuals that are deceased. However, you will note that Annabelle, I believe it's Jamil, she is living. And they felt very strongly that because of her contributions to the state, that she should be included on the list. So there is an asterisk that at some point in time in the very long, distant future, should she pass on, that she would be allowed to be used as a street name. Additionally, there are 3 individuals that are associated with tribes. And in section 2, I believe, of your policy in front of you, section Roman numeral 2, 1B, talks about indigenous names. So because of that input that we received from the tribes, as well as input that we received from the council, it was important to have a stipulation that these names are important. They should be on the list. They shouldn't be recognized. However, a developer would need to go to the specific tribe and get their approval before the street name, or before the name can be used as a street name, in order to honor them appropriately. The reason for walking you through all of that is just to give you the amount of work and detail that the committee went through in order to get this name to this proposal to where it is. The vice chair and chair met with the city council, I believe a week or 2 ago. They did get input from the council, and a few items were seeking names that were from the Korean, associated with the Korean War Memorial, because that's in the center of town center. You'll notice that Don Cohen is on the list. He was an individual that was instrumental in the funding and planning of that memorial. So we did look at names that were associated with Wilsonville as well. Again, lots of detail. This will be provided to the planning staff so that they can use that as a resource when they work with developers. The other thing to note is any of the names on this list, it's all up to the developer. The developer chooses the name. So it's unclear which names will become future streets, but just to have that background. So this list was recommended to the policy that's in front of you with the names was recommended by the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, and that will be forwarded to the City Council on October 7th, I believe. But wanted to make sure that this commission, since you had so much input into the town center plan and will continue to be so involved, wanted to make sure that this committee was aware of the recommendations that were moving forward.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions or comments? We'll start with Commissioner Constantine.
I just wanted to say thank you. What was fascinating to watch, and all the steps you went through, and how we're so careful and thoughtful about how we approach this. So thank you for the hard work.
I will pass that along to the committee.
Commissioner Heberlein.
Yeah, I appreciate the work and taking the time to come and give this to us is not a required thing. So thank you for giving us an opportunity to look at this. The one question that I would have, not to the names or the standards, but, you know, when I was looking at this list, I wasn't familiar with any of the names, and I was wondering if staff has thought at all about how, when any of these names are used, if there's going to be something, a monument or some way to identify the significance of the person and why they're essentially on a street name, so that the rest of the community can better understand their impact.
One thing that I did not mention is a lot of the research was done by our summer intern, Aria Azizi, and part of his project was to put together a handbook, if you will. So the intent is that all of that work will be given to the planning department. So they will have that, and either they can put it on their website for developers to view. I don't know that there will be any requirement moving forward, but absolutely have the information available to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Willard, any comments? Thank you. Commissioner Skoll?
Yes, I do have a question. On the tribal leaders, it says it requires tribal approval. Are they, are they ready to do that? Is that something that's pretty quick, or, it sounds like they made the recommendations for those names, and so what would that process be?
It would be going to the tribal leaders. This has been done before. One of the examples that the DEI committee used was the Corvallis School District. That's where a number of the criteria came from, was based off of the work that they had done. And they had actually sought approval of tribes. So I believe that depending on how much information is available, it can move quickly. However, it would be important that the developer start that process and get that letter before their street needs to be named.
Okay. Thank you. Very good work. Did learn something too that I didn't know, that what the Tualatin is an Indian tribe. Had no idea. So learned something off of that.
Yeah, if you go to the DEI committee's packet from their last meeting, there's a little bit more research than what's in this. And the individuals that they selected are really incredible people. We did, like I mentioned, that deep dive before we submitted that final list of names, and there are really incredible people in this state that have made quite an impact. So it's really exciting to see that they could be recognized in Wilsonville.
So essentially, this is the finalized version here, the finalized group.
Yes, so the policy with the names dated with today's date, that is what was recommended last night by the committee.
Okay, thank you. Good work. Great job.
Commissioner Semenova?
Yes, thank you so much for coming and informing us. This is my first year serving in the commission, so I didn't have all that background. So I appreciate that, and I love the approach and all the hard work and thought that went into it. My only question is, just to confirm, the developers will only be able to choose from this list?
So they could, if they had another individual that was not on this list, so town center is going, it's not intended to all be developed at once. Hopefully it's a quick process, but it likely will take years. So should someone else be of interest that has passed away, the developer could propose a name and they would follow the process in Roman numeral 2, and they could propose a name meeting those criteria that the committee used as well, so A through F, and they could propose that name.
Okay, thank you. But they would have to abide by this criteria if they
Yes, and
wanted to introduce a different name.
Yes, and I believe that would go through the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? I would just like to say, yes, thank you for all the effort, all the time, and the diligence. The original list in the packet and all the details was actually fascinating reading, so I appreciated that. But yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
That takes us then to informational item number 3. Next on the agenda is the Wilsonville Industrial Land Readiness. Again, this is a chance for the Planning Commission to learn more about a specific topic. No public comment will be taken on this agenda item. If the public has questions or comments on the topic, you are encouraged to reach out directly to city staff. At this time, I call on city staff to present information they have prepared for this item. Will city staff please present?
Thank you, Chair. And tonight, we have Cindy Luxoy, Associate Planner, with us to talk us through our status on the Wilsonville Industrial Land Readiness Project. And so I'll turn it over to Cindy, who always gives a great presentation.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, Chair Carr and Commissioners. My name is Cindy Luxoy, Associate Planner, and we're here tonight to give you a brief update about the Wilsonville Industrial Land Readiness Project, which that's kind of a mouthful, so we've been calling it WILLR. This project, let's see. Here, let me get this moving. Hello. Okay, there we go. The WILLR project has two phases, which together will support attracting high-quality industry and economic opportunity to Wilsonville. The first phase of the project is currently underway, and it's focused on the Basalt Creek and West Railroad planning areas in northwest Wilsonville. And on this aerial, the Basalt Creek area is outlined in red, and the West Railroad area is in yellow. It's generally the area that's north of Southwest Day Road, west of the interstate, and south of what will be the extension of the Basalt Creek Parkway. It goes from the railroad tracks all the way over to Boone's Ferry and then eventually Green Hill. The two future industrial areas, so Basalt Creek and West Railroad, are the subject of the Basalt Creek Concept Plan that was jointly prepared with the city of Tualatin and adopted by Wilsonville in 2018. And the first phase of the WILLR project lays the foundation for moving the concept plan area to an industrial development ready status, which will enable the city to accept development applications for industrial projects and realize the area's economic development potential. The Basalt Creek Concept Plan includes 3 industrial land use categories, as shown on the map on this slide. And those include the high-tech employment, light industrial, and craft industrial. So the high-tech is the area that's in kind of the medium purple color. And then light industrial is in the western part, which is more a paler purple. And then there's craft industrial kind of sandwiched in between, which is the teal sort of color. And then West Railroad is in gray. It's off to the left there. And in the concept plan was not given a designation or a land use category. At the time, it was a very heavily constrained area from a natural resource perspective. And so in the concept plan, it was kind of deferred for future planning. The 2 key elements of implementation and phasing in the concept plan are to assure that the zoning is compatible with future land use and to consider capital improvement projects to spur development. The zoning code amendments that we are currently working on will focus on refinements to the city's planned development industrial zone, as well as evaluate whether to extend the Coffee Creek Industrial Design Overlay District form-based code to the area, and if so, how it could best be applied to enable implementation of those envisioned land use categories. There are several tasks, as shown on this slide, in the first phase of the WILLR project, and they are discussed in more detail in the Planning Commission staff report. We have contracted with Eco Northwest, DKS Associates, Pacific Habitat Services, and Consor to do various aspects of the project. And most of these steps or tasks are currently underway. The infrastructure funding plan piece will come a little bit later, and city staff will be doing the zoning analysis as well as the code amendments. Work sessions with the Planning Commission and City Council for the first phase are anticipated in October through December of this year. And Planning Commission and City Council public hearings on the code amendments are expected early in 2025. And then the infrastructure funding plan work will be occurring throughout next year. There's also a second phase to this project, which is it expands the project to a citywide analysis and an economic opportunities analysis. And that portion of the project will include things like reviewing the market trends, inventorying and developing an economic strategy for all of Wilsonville's industrial lands over a 20-year planning horizon, recommending citywide development code refinements to support anticipated economic activity in industrial areas throughout the city. And the second phase will serve as a companion to the city's housing capacity analysis to help inform both future residential and job growth decisions, as well as input to the future update of the comprehensive plan, which will occur, I believe, in 2026, I think, is what we're looking at. And a request for proposals for the second phase of the project will be issued later this month, and work on that portion will start this fall and continue through next year. So at tonight's meeting, staff is seeking feedback from Planning Commission on if you have questions or comments about this first phase of the project. And that concludes my brief presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Skoll.
I do have questions. The light industrial district, is that small manufacturing, or is there something specific there, or is that warehousing? What, kind of trying to align what the definitions are of those areas?
Yeah, a combination of, like light manufacturing, warehouse distribution, like spec development buildings likely, distinguished from the high-tech employment zone, which was envisioned to be more of, to probably include some office, be more like a corporate campus kind of development type. And then the craft industrial would include some residential possibly. It's kind of a transition zone between, because that area, let me go back to the map, which would be helpful. That craft industrial area, the western side of it is the Basalt Creek Canyon. Those lots in there are long, skinny lots, east-west lots, and there's residential development on the eastern side of them, and then the canyon on the west. And so it was an effort with craft industrial to try and find some type of a zone that could make that transition eventually to like micro businesses or smaller entrepreneurial kind of studios or things like that might happen there.
Okay, and in the West Railroad area, is that a kind of open game right now that falls into an industrial type zone, but to be determined?
Yeah, West Railroad is a very interesting part of this. When the concept plan was done, West Railroad included a lot of environmentally constrained property. And also just access is really difficult to that area. Really, the main access to it has to come from off of Grams Ferry Road. So like where let's see if I can get my cursor, down in the south, right there, the southern part of it, because there isn't any other way to access it unless you go across railroad tracks. So from either Clay or, what's the one on the other side? Trying to think. Either on the north side of where the prison is or on the south side. And both of those would entail like railroad overcrossings, which are just not going to happen. So at that time, it was very constrained both from access and environmental. In the past, in the years since, there has been a lot of development out there of contractors' establishments. The middle and southern part of that is owned by maybe 3 or 4 property owners, and they have been progressively clearing and grading and putting down asphalt in a bunch of that and putting up pole buildings and things like that. And so the amount of resource out there has been diminishing. One of the purposes of having Pacific Habitat Services do a survey of the entire area, including Basalt and West Railroad, is to determine, what resources are actually left out there, and, how might we want to proceed with development in that area. It's likely that it would end up being something like a light industrial or a PDI zone, because of the constraints on the development as well as distance from I-5 and major roads.
Last question.
Yeah?
Notice that the city line goes down right through the middle of this. So through our planning process, how much coordination will we have with Tualatin to make sure there's continuity to design? Integration, there could be multiple businesses that are working on either side of the street. And then also, basically maintaining some type of cost equality, through that process of development.
Really, and Dan can chime in on this one, but
Sure.
I really think there's not going to be much coordination at all. We kind of have the cities have different goals for their portions of Basalt Creek. In Tualatin, it's majority residential with then, some manufacturing park in that area, which they just, last year, I think it was, adopted what they're calling their Basalt Creek Employment Area, which is a new zoning code for that manufacturing park portion. The parkway presents like a major constraint to any kind of, like road connections or anything through there, because it's really going to be, there'll be that intersection at Graham's Ferry and the Parkway and at Boone's Ferry and the Parkway. The rest of it between like Graham's and Boone's is actually going to be elevated because it has to go over the canyon in that area. And so there won't be, the only road connections between Tualatin and Wilsonville are at those two intersections, at Graham and Boone's. There was in the concept plan, you can see here, there was a like tentative kind of local access that ran north-south, the Kinsman Road extension through there, but really that's not going to be possible at this point. So there will be a connection with the trail, though, along the canyon. But, Dan, was there anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, I think you hit the main points. What I was just going to say that really that that barrier that's Basalt Creek Parkway really does create kind of a natural break. And it's not like it's more going to be, I mean, it's not a divided highway, but it's more like an expressway type design that, it's not like even a day road or other typical arterial in Wilsonville where you'll have development facing it and accessing off of it. It really will be kind of a dividing line. And so you will see, and a buffer between different types of development potentially on either side.
Well, and I think there also will be, on the west side of the canyon, there is going to be, for the trail, there'll be a way for people to come down off the parkway to access a trail on the north and south sides.
Yeah, there will be a trail connection, but.
Yeah. But no vehicle connections.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Sembenova?
My question's about what does the approach look like for the traffic assessment of what traffic that will bring and how the cities will divide the burdens each carry with the traffic that brings?
So when the concept plan was done, there was something called a transportation refinement plan that looked at, the main arterials, the roads within there for future, which ones were going to need future improvements, things like that. But there also was an analysis of the types of uses that were proposed on both sides of, in both jurisdictions. And there was a calculation at that time of the number of trips that were anticipated from the various development in each jurisdiction. And there was what was called a trip cap, which was that if development on either side of the parkway looked that it would exceed that estimate of the number of trips, that it should be, assessed or revisited so that we don't end up with a lot more trips than what was anticipated, that the roads could actually handle within that without triggering more improvements than were in the transportation refinement plan. It is a concern because all of the residential development that's occurring in Tualatin, a natural way for them to go is south down to our Ellickson interchange. And also access the commercial area, all the Costco and all of those things that are down there. But so it's something that we monitor. We've been kind of, as development is occurring north of the parkway, we get notice of those developments, and I think Dan.
Yeah, we've had discussions with Tualatin, and we're monitoring that. We actually believe we have a contract that DCAS is not only monitoring our traffic, but the traffic from New Tualatin. So it goes along with that. I mean, Wilsonville never makes a land use decision or development approval without analyzing the traffic and the traffic impact.
Yeah.
My comments are around the parkway. It looks like we're going to extend 124th and then have Parkway go. It looks like it's going to go all the way under or over I-5. Are we really going to build a road that's on the border between two different cities, and who's going to maintain it? Because we have the problem on Ellickson, 65th and Stafford. Nobody knows who's going to do it.
So the parkway will be a Washington County road.
Okay.
Will be a county road.
Yep.
And will it go under I-5? And is Day Road also going to go under I-5?
I mean, those projects are a bit out now, so, I mean, design haven't gotten to that point.
Eventually, there's
more.
supposed to be two overcrossings.
Yeah, it'd be overcrossings,
Okay.
but.
Yeah.
those aren't planned for the immediate future.
Okay.
Timing will be.
I'll take your comment.
Commissioner Willard? I'm shocked.
I had a question around the concurrency of planning. Often high-tech employment or high-tech areas are big power hogs or water hogs. And so when do we start assessing whether or not we have the power to feed a land of that size? Or if our power can be expanded?
That's a very good question.
So the short of that, I would say, is I know PG is actively looking at expanding power capacity. I mean, they're building the new substation, they're on Parkway. But I imagine, while I'm not part of their planning, I've had conversations, their planning similar to what we do with industrial is we do our best to make conservative estimates, knowing that there will be some power users typically. And when those projects come in, while we do, in terms of capacity and long-term planning, there's data and the consultants work with kind of a conservative estimate to make sure the pipes aren't too small. And that's typically how engineering planning goes. But at the same time, when a development comes in, if there's not capacity, that's analyzed, right? While we try to plan into the future the best we can, if there's something that's such an outlier, then we do analyze that concurrency. And obviously, and I've heard these conversations, especially like with things like data centers and things like that, when they're siting, they're looking already, that's the first thing they're looking for is the capacity in the grid or potential to put capacity in the grid.
Yeah, and I guess that's the heart of my comment, is that if we want to attract somebody to these or other industrial lands, if we could also advertise that power is available or there are expansion plans at the ready when they're ready to develop. And same with water, it could actually help developers. But I don't know that this size of a parcel would warrant that, but for other industrial lands.
Well, and then also PGE, their substation out there, they're putting in all kinds of battery storage, power storage on this right here.
Yeah.
This substation.
And it looks like they have a lot more room to expand in the future as well. So that would be attractive. But. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you, Cindy. Very informative. I had one question on page 2 of the executive summary towards the bottom, and you might have already answered this somewhat. It says, Eco Northwest will prepare an analysis of land currently occupied by contractors' establishments, which have proliferated in recent years throughout the future industrial area and often include small office use, storage buildings, and gravel or paved storage or lay-down yards with few employees. What does that mean?
So one of the aspects, so I've flipped it back to the aerial here, so I can kind of walk you through around here. So for instance, like in the Coffee Creek industrial area out here, we have mostly contractors' establishments, which are essentially, a large, a parcel of land where a contractor might, a lot of times they're rented out to contractors to store equipment, to trucks or and there might be maybe 1 or 2 employees, but it's not actually a high employment kind of use. And they have been, they're used for storage, for, like I think out in West Railroad, there's like power poles and things like that. I don't know if it's PGE that's using it or Bonneville or who it might be. There's a big landscaping business down here in the southern part of West Railroad. but they're land extensive and they don't have many people working there. And so they're really not consistent with the vision for Basalt Creek, which was actually manufacturing and distribution companies and, people employing lots of people. Does that answer your question?
It does. I didn't understand
Yeah.
contractors' establishments.
Yeah.
That threw me, but now I understand.
Yeah,
Thank
like a
you.
landscape contractor,
got it.
painter,
Building
construction
contractors. Got it.
company,
Okay.
yeah, all those kind of
Well,
things.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you for informational
Sure.
presentation. That was great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, and we'll be back in next month with a lot of meaty information. We are just right now reviewing the draft economic analysis, market analysis, and we have a preliminary local access map from DKS. We'll have the information from Pacific Habitat about the resources. And so we'll get into a lot more detail next month.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you for all your comments.
Thank you, Cindy.
Next item is city council action minutes. Anybody got questions? I have one, but you let Ms. Gail Hinman leave. I just wondered, just saying. Council was informed that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in City of Grants Pass versus Johnson. Does that have any impact on our city? You don't know?
However, prepared to talk about that next time.
Got it. Any other questions on city council work? Nope. 2024 PC work program? That's just our normal thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we've completed all scheduled agenda items. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
The meeting is adjourned at 6:48 PM. Thank you.